Good morning and welcome to this broadcast, which is being held in partnership with Heart and Soul TV and Sevio Institute. Sevio Institute is hosting these dialogues, a series of 6 dialogues that we're hosting to discuss Zimbabwe's Vision 2030. The first dialogue that we held was on the 22nd of September, which was the need for a vision process. And today, we are going to be giving an overview of Zimbabwe today, looking at where Zimbabwe is today, a special focus on Zimbabwe's economy and economic policy making in Zimbabwe. We're going to have people talking to us about business, the economy, inclusive development, and just giving us an overview of how Zimbabwe can become and achieve Vision 2030, looking at where we are at today. My name is Belinda Chaura, and I'm going to be a facilitator for the day. I am with Sevio Institute, and I would just like to give us an idea of where we're broadcasting. So I'm sure you're watching this. A number of people are in the Zoom room as we speak, but you can also watch us on Heart and Soul TV on Facebook, and also on the Sevio Institute Facebook page, and also on Newsday Zimbabwe Facebook page. Now, you might ask, why are we doing these dialogues? What is the point of citizens, ordinary people coming together to talk about Vision 2030? Well, as an organization, we felt we need to create this collective so that we can develop a consensus on what it will take to achieve an upper middle income economy by 2030. We want to encourage a culture of collaboration and co-production between different players for the achievement of Vision 2030. And we want to find a way to agree on a process of mutual accountability between state and non-state actors. If you are online, so if you are on Twitter and on Facebook or on LinkedIn, feel free to share any content that's coming out of today's meeting using the hashtags towards an inclusive society, catalyzing Vision 2030, and hashtag Zim Vision 2030, or just Vision 2030. So I'm going to go into our speakers for today. We've got an interesting program. First up is Dr. Tendai Murisa, who is with Sevio Institute. He's the executive director of Sevio Institute. And he, of course, is passionate about all things Africa. And his research areas are many. His focus is on citizen agency, on solidarity, philanthropy, public policy, and he has done a lot of research on agrarian reforms in Zimbabwe and across the continent of Africa. He founded Sevio Institute in 2018, and Sevio Institute's mission, or its vision rather, is a quest for an inclusive society. So that kind of underpins the whole reason why we are hosting these dialogues. We want to create or encourage an inclusive Zimbabwean. So Dr. Murisa, I will invite you as our first speaker. He is going to give an overview of Zimbabwe today. And he's going to go into some interesting statistics that we collect as an organization to create a better understanding of where Zimbabwe is today. Dr. Murisa, I'll invite you to unmute yourself and share your video, and then take us through your presentation.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted already. Is that true? Can you hear me?
Yes, it is true. Go for it, Dr.
And you can see my video?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. You can see my screen as well?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. The only thing I would like to take away from that very elaborate introduction is the idea of founding or establishing Sevio Institute. I did not do it by myself. There are many others, some of them in the room, that helped birth this vision of establishing an institute that focuses on trying to create dialogue among Zimbabweans. So I think this is part and parcel of our mission. And today, what I've been asked to do is to just take us through where we are as a country, and also to begin to interrogate possibilities of achieving the upper middle income status that has been sort of stated by this current government around whether we are ready to, so that we are ready to be an upper middle income economy. So we'll deal with quite a number of things, and I hope I'll have time. The challenge is always time. I hope to take us through the aspiration, what Vision 2030 is all about, and also to say in the backdrop of talking about the aspiration, it's necessary for us to understand the context in which sort of we're trying to move the needle to the desired position. So we'll discuss a bit the characteristics of the crisis in Zimbabwe. And then also we look, after the crisis, we're looking at what has been the progress made in sort of addressing the issues that we sort of identified way back in 2018 when we had a new government come in. And also then going to Vision 2030, interrogate it a bit. It's a 58-page document for those who have not yet seen it. So it's a good evening read or Sunday morning read, very easy to follow. So I'll not discuss all of it. We'll just look at the values and also some of the anchor assumptions around the achievement of Vision 2030 and also its targets. We'll conclude by saying there are many pathways, and there's a possible pathway to achieving Vision 2030 or an inclusive society by 2030 that has been developed by colleagues in civil society. And so I'll just share a slide as a conclusion around that. So what are we talking about when we're talking about this vision? Well, vision is the initial thought about what kind of place, in this instance, a country, it will be and why it will matter. So I think it's very prudent for any country, including ours, that we have a form of a vision, and so that it provides for us a compass or a target of where we are going. Many countries that we celebrate today, Malaysia, South Korea, China, and many others, developed on the anchor or developed on the foundation of a solid vision. So that vision, then you build upon that vision by developing a strategy which becomes the blueprint for the vision of how to implement that vision. Many others will develop a roadmap or annual plans or 3-year plans towards achieving the vision. So for us, it's the TSP, then the NDS1, then the NDS2. Those are sort of the roadmaps. Those are the sort of the building blocks towards the achievement of Vision 2030. So when you're talking about Vision 2030, you cannot isolate that discussion from what the TSP achieved, the Transitional Stabilization Program, and what has the National Development Strategy 1 achieved. What are the gaps in there? So our discussion today is focused not only about saying is there clarity of the vision, but also on the existence of a coherent strategy to achieve the vision. And also I must say this, we are building upon the conversation we had in the first webinar, where we brought in colleagues from the church, colleagues from the youth, colleagues from the labor movement to talk about their aspirations from those constituencies of what, number one, of what they expect of a vision, and number two, of what the role they expect to play in the successful achievement of this vision or the realization of the vision. So in a nutshell, what is the aspiration of Vision 2030? It reads towards a prosperous and empowerment upper middle income society by 2030 with job opportunities and a higher quality of life for its citizens. So just being naughty a bit to say the challenges, like we said in the last conversation, we were never given a chance to even make an input into the vision statement as non-state actors. Like I said in the previous conversation, I suspect that the people who write our policy documents cannot fill up one bus. So this is something that is written by the few, the selected few. But if we were to say broaden it a bit and include some of us in civil society, some of us concerned about broad development, maybe it would read towards a prosperous and inclusive upper middle income society by 2030 with job opportunities, equal access to social policy goods. And here we're talking, when we talk about social policy goods, we're talking about health, education, housing, decent transportation, food security, and a high quality for all its citizens. Why am I playing around with these terms? Why have I added inclusive? The current methods of market-based measures that we have broadly that measure economic development, that rank countries on the basis of development, most probably use measures such as gross domestic product, gross national product, employment levels, etc. But these have shown, and even The Economist has shown that there's challenges around just using GDP. The Economist, I think in 3-4 years ago, wrote a very seminal article that they called Beyond GDP, that we need to begin to think beyond these abstract measures because there are high levels of inequality within a society. And why did we add social policy goods? Because the assumption within the Washington Consensus, which sort of predominates development as we speak, the neoliberal framework that assumes that once you get the market, when you get the prices right, the market will resolve all problems in a society. So these development frameworks, they erroneously assume that markets can effectively deliver on social goods, such as health, education, housing, and food security. But in the countries that have high levels of inequality, as we have seen in Zimbabwe, where the private sector comes to say they're going to play a role in health delivery, education, housing, you actually see that they always target the cream of the society, the upper echelons of society, not the cream, the upper echelons of society, the top of the pyramid, the TOP. Whilst there are very few private sector-led initiatives, say in health, that are actually focused of servicing markets that are comprised of those at the base of the pyramid. The same applies to education, housing, and transportation. So in the absence of a government, we actually find that there's skewed distribution of these social goods. So that's why we are mentioning that in the vision statement, government needs to be seized with the delivery of equitable social policy goods. So that's the qualification there. And the final qualifier is around for all its citizens. The current framing is around for citizens in Zimbabwe. We have seen so many. Zimbabwe is 41 years old, and we have come across many development frameworks or models or plans that actually have empowered others, but have not empowered all. So here we actually need to emphasize that we need to go back to the vision of 1980 when we're talking about housing for all, health for all. So now when you read the documents that come after Zimprest, the all is sort of dropped. It just now says citizens. But we're saying that if we're really talking about an inclusive vision, it should benefit all. So that's sort of the framing around it. But also, like I said, there's a backdrop to say, as we are planning for the future, because the danger and the excitement of any government, new or old, is always to give themselves to say, oh, we're looking at 2030, we're looking at 2040. And at times we get carried away or we lose focus of where we are and what needs to be done now. So we use a long-term vision as a selling point. So in Shona, we say, Tichakui tries Wakati will do this for you. That's what politicians sell. And we're getting into that silly season anyway of election campaigning. So we'll be told about all these grand visions. But we're saying that the danger of grand vision setting without understanding where you are is you may keep on postponing the development project by saying that we will do this in the future. So what is the current context? Our economy is currently associated with high levels of unemployment, and even sort of some of the positive developments we have seen in the economy around infrastructure projects that I'll discuss later. We have not seen that making a dent on unemployment. Hyperinflation, now and again, we term it, but it comes back again. It was bad in 2020. It looks like it's coming down a bit this year, but we cannot say that we're out of the woods yet. Then there's international isolation. Zimbabwe, and it's also by coincidence that we're having this discussion in the month of October, a month that has been dedicated to raising or to making an international outcry against the sanctions imposed against Zimbabwe. So that's a context in which we are operating. And so many private sector companies that have tried to do international business would tell you of the challenges they've faced of operating from Zimbabwe, and also the challenges that the government has faced in terms of addressing some issues. And as I said to colleagues yesterday, I'll try not to dwell much on sanctions because that's a webinar on its own. And given our polarization, others say they don't exist, others say they are not the real cause of the problem, but I thought it important to flag them here. Then the country also faces an acute shortage of foreign currency. Even as we speak right now, the parallel market rate has begun to sort of go beyond what we're seeing with the official rate, because what was happening at the auction, those would be allocated foreign currency are not getting it in time. And so there are allegations that some people are going to the parallel market to secure foreign currency for their production. And also the opening up of the economy after the lockdowns means that everyone who had sort of shut down their operations is coming back into production, and there's a real demand for foreign currency. And I think Sekai and even Dr. Nigel, my co-presenters, will talk to this as they look at the challenges that our industry faces. So there's also a challenge of de-industrialization. I must say that in the past year or so, we began to see some attempts with support maybe from the African Development Bank around the sort of reopening of certain companies, etc. But also there's still limited utilization of factory capacity, collapse of infrastructure, high prices of goods. Cash shortages have somewhat improved. In agriculture, there's still the issues around production. We've seen, but we flagged production here, despite the fact that probably in the last year or two, we've seen high levels of production in the maize value chain, in the wheat value chain, and also in tobacco. But we need this as a consistent pattern, not just as a once-off. So that's why we keep on flagging it. And there's still contestations over land reform and disagreement over the compensation model. We'll discuss this as we discuss the steps that we're taking, that government is taking towards achieving Vision 2030. Then in health, this is a sorry story. Shortage or unavailability of essential drugs, shortage of machines to carry out basic procedures. There's a huge out-migration of our skilled sort of personnel, especially doctors, radiographers, and nurses. And even now, the country is failing to sort of pay competitive prices for those in health. Our education has also been affected by the fact that we have not been able to grow our infrastructure, the education infrastructure, especially primary and secondary level. And also coupled with poor remuneration, the high levels of teacher absenteeism, and the outcomes, the results are really bad. If you look at the O and A level results, and even the grade 7 results, some of them maybe have been due to COVID-19. But even before COVID-19, if you look at the academic results of our learners, you can actually see that the pass rate is actually going down. And also there's the issue around just the usual, the shortage of textbooks, increasing number of school dropouts. We have a challenge with housing. There's very limited supply of low-priced housing stock. Most of housing developments that are happening is being pushed by private developers, either families or some companies then that target a certain layer in society, but not the bottom of the pyramid or the base of the pyramid, as I've been often corrected. Then political and governance issues that characterize the crisis. There's huge polarization, and the polarization is manifest in many ways. I've received calls from yesterday on why we're having a conversation on Vision 2030, which is allegedly a political party's project. Then my argument was, it's a vision that is taking resources from the National Treasury. There's no way that as people we cannot interrogate this, but it speaks to the polarization that we have in our country, that anything that is done by another political party, we then frown upon it, etc. So I think besides the partisan-based polarization, I think we've lost the idea of the Zimbabwean national question. What is the idea of Zimbabwe itself? So that's the challenge. And the manner in which we disagree, there's high levels of intolerance, there's weak or no respect of the rule of law, there's failure to manage succession within political parties. We saw this in ZANU-PF. It ended becoming a coup, with which they call not a coup. Then in the MDC, we also saw those skirmishes. They're still ongoing, that the party is now fractured around 2 or 3 other formations because of the challenges of a succession from the founding leader to the next generation of leaders. So that has not been resolved across political parties. Then there's the abuse of electoral processes and also election-based violence. Then what has been the progress that we have made to date? For those who do not know, one of our flagship products is what we call Zimbabwe's ZimCitizensWatch.org, where we track the progress that has been made by government since the inauguration of the current president. So in their manifesto, they made 237 promises. And of those 237 promises, They've only fully implemented 6, they've broken 5, they've modified 2. But for us, and I've always been in trouble about this, for us, what we are tracking and what we find that there's value in tracking, given that their term is not necessarily expired, is what is in progress. What is in progress right now is 184, they are under implementation. And this is an overview of the performance in the first half of 2021. So we can share this slide later. It's got a lot of detail, but I think this one is much better in terms of just giving you a graphic picture of where we are. The orange, I hope I'm right, I've been accused of being colorblind. The one, this color here, the one that has got bigger sort of graphs, economy, agriculture, social services, it just tells you the number of promises that is made. Then the color green here at the top, it tells you the sort of the outstanding promises that have no. So here we're looking at promises that have been totally completed. So if we're saying that they have only completed 6 or 7, that means the majority have not yet been completed. But also, it's important for us to remember the slide that I showed you earlier, this one, where I showed you that there are 184 that are in progress. So they may complete them or they may not complete them by the time their term of office comes to an end. So this is just a picture. This is just a picture of what...
Our time is almost running up.
Oh, okay, so I have to rush, yeah?
Yeah.
So, okay, so Vision 2030. Vision 2030 is characterized by 10 values. There's the value of constitutionalism, democracy, decentralization and devolution, human rights and property rights. But the challenge that we have had with many well-meaning documents is that there are no indicators of progress. So there's no way that we can begin to say, are we on course to achieving this? So we have said that we're not going to wait for government to give us its own indicators of progress. We are going to develop our own. So we've developed this column that we're calling indicators of progress. Then there are progress made or challenges that have been faced. So here I'll just use one just to explain my story. Around constitutionalism, the alignment of laws and institutions. So our indicator of progress is to say, we have a new constitution in the country, but the challenge is, and this is agreed to by all parties, parliament, the executive and opposition parties, that there's need for the alignment of laws that exist to the constitution, but that is still work in progress. It has not yet been done. But the concerns that we have when we're looking at progress is, instead of aligning laws, what we have actually seen government do is to actually begin to amend the constitution. So I think that's the challenge, to say what should have begun, what should have happened first, etc. Admittedly, there are certain things that are not perfect about the constitution. So there's a raging debate right now, but should we be amending the constitution or aligning laws? With democracy, for some reason, government framed democracy as free, fair, credible, and violence-free elections. For us at Severe Institute, there's more to democracy than just holding elections. But this is what they've used. But we use broader, sort of a broader framing of measuring how we are progressing towards democracy. So for purposes of time, I'll move to the next set of values. The rule of law, all Zimbabweans are not above the law. So we are hoping that an indicator of progress is that we see an increased number of rules-based decisions rather than politically influenced decisions. And number 2, the autonomy of the judiciary. And the progress that has so far been made is the decentralization and increase in the number of the courts. So we saw the opening of the provincial courts in Mashonaland West. At some point, we also saw the launching of the corruption courts, etc. So we are hoping that we begin to see more of this, because that is what is required. Freedom of expression, we have actually become worse. We used to be ranked 126 in 2020. 2021, we're now ranked 130 out of 180 countries. So there are certain challenges in terms of the pathway towards achieving Vision 2030. Then what will be the anchor factors required to achieve Vision 2030? Number 1, they say we need to have national unity or consensus to begin to agree on Vision 2030, where we move our country. But again, like we said last week, you cannot expect this if you're not engaging citizens around the framing of the document. You want to bring them on board to an already established document. And many people are saying, you cannot expect us to move forward before we've resolved historical issues. So there are challenges there around dealing with national unity. Then the government is also saying another anchor for the success of Vision 2030, and these are their words: broad-based citizenry participation in national socio-economic development. Again, it's a challenge when we look at the different documents, even Vision 2030 itself, TSP, and NDS1. Very limited participation of non-state actors, maybe private sector types here and there at these big consultations in hotels, etc. But we do not see town hall-like meetings. We do not see settings where citizens are being engaged. So there's also the issue around the re-engagement with the global community. It's ongoing, but it has not yet yielded the results that government expected at the beginning. There's still some issues that are outstanding. And also some violations of human rights that have happened since 2018. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move forward. There's so much detail into this. I don't know what I expected, how I expected to finish all this. Then, okay, so this again, what it will take to accomplish Vision 2030. I just want to talk about the targets, then I conclude, Belinda. So for us to reach an upper middle income economy as framed by government, is to improve on gross national income. At the moment, it stands at 1,440. Our target is 5,000 gross national income. So you can see the work that needs to be done just to improve on that. So you're talking of close to 400% increase in gross national income. And also our employment rates to move close to 80%. Then our poverty rates are currently sitting at 62.5%, to reduce that to 25%. Then there's this statement to say we want to achieve SDGs, which is problematic. And it tells you that at times we throw things into documents like this without necessarily thinking. There are 16 or 17 SDGs. For a country to think that they can achieve all of them, I think many countries, the smart thing that they are doing, they are choosing SDGs that speak to their context and begin to work on those. But for us, we're saying we'll achieve all the SDGs, which is problematic. Access to electricity, this is clear. We're currently sitting at 52.25% nationally. We want to improve that to 72%. Rural households want to move from 27 to 60%, 86% to 95% for urban. Improved water, we want to move to 100%. Life expectancy, they want to change from 60 to 65 years. And to do all this, there's need for double-digit economic growth between 7 to 12%. Last year, the economy actually shrunk a bit. This year, they expect that it will grow. So if you look, this is 2021. We're already left with 9 years. Are we on course? It's a discussion for others. So, but like I said, there are pathways that have been identified by others. And this is in a report that we'll be launching next week together with others around what civil society thinks. So civil society has identified 11 issues. I'll just list them. Improved political governance, dealing with corruption, addressing issues in democracy, especially around elections, enhancing transparency and accountability in the operations of government, rule of law, fostering rule of law, improving service delivery, improving economic governance, broadening and opening up the civic space. We're seeing concerns now with government trying to register NGOs outside of existing laws, etc. We think civil society is an important pillar to a nation's development. Addressing issues to do with equality and inclusion, corporate governance, and constitutionalism. So I'm so sorry I took so much time, Belinda. I just thought we'd take us through this. We can always discuss this as we go into other webinars, but we thought that we should bring Vision 2030 to this discussion in this way so that we can build upon it. Thanks again, colleagues, for taking time to listen.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dr. Marisa. And I think my key takeaway from that is speaking about equitable social goods, and making it more inclusive, and not necessarily just focusing on single groups within the economy, but making social goods and public products available for everybody. So thank you for that. We'll get time later to ask questions, but if you have a question now, please feel free to post it in the chat. Okay, so now we're going into our next speaker, who is Nigel Chanakira. He's no stranger to the public forum. He's been involved in business for many years. He says at least 26 years, but it could be more than that. Most of you know him as one of the founders or the founder of Kingdom Securities Limited, which at that time made him the youngest CEO in a banking institution in Zimbabwe. And at that time, he was age 28. So from that time, he's proceeded to lead a number of teams in business where he started, acquired, or facilitated mergers for banks, financial services firms, different conglomerates across the Southern African landscape in Malawi, Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Mauritius, and even in the United Kingdom. He, since establishing and then later on selling Kingdom Securities, he's formed Kingdom Private Equity, a power tank, where he is focusing his specialist advisory services. And he does that as a thought leader. And today he's coming to join us as a thought leader with vast experience in business. So if you could give a round of applause, I'd say give us a round of applause for Nigel, but we can't do that. So Nigel, I'm opening up the floor to you. Please go for it. I hope you can unmute your mic. I can see your video, so you're visible to everybody. But Nigel, please go for it and talk to us about Vision 2030 and economic policy.
Okay, thank you so much, Belinda, and thank you to Tendai for opening things up and getting us going in terms of the discussion. I am going to try and share my screen. I've got a very simple task today, which is to deal with the economic issues around Vision 2030. And do I have screen sharing capacity?
You should do.
Just give me a second. My laptop's pretty slow today. But I think Tendai has really done a good job in terms of opening up the discussion for what we really need to look at in terms of the economy. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. It's still processing, but I think it's coming.
Okay. All right. I think foundationally, you know, when we talk of visions and plans, I take comfort in a scripture, Jeremiah 29, verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans for good and not for disaster, to give you hope. And don't we need just that in Zimbabwe? Because given where we've come from and the background that Tendai gave you, you know, we're in a bit of a hole, up a creek, as they would say, without a paddle. But I'm also encouraged by the fact that, you know, my own mentor, Paul J. Meyer, put it this way. He said, whatever you vividly imagine, ardently desire, sincerely believe, and enthusiastically act upon must inevitably come to pass. And I think insofar as Vision 2030 is concerned, I just want to focus on 5 key areas and go through about 28 slides and, you know, speed past the objectives that we have in our vision, look at, you know, quite critically the attributes of what we would call progressive economic policies based on what we need. And then, of course, look at key opportunities and challenges that we have, notably on the economic policy formulation. And then I will conclude. Can you hear me clearly?
Hi, Nigel. Yes, I can hear you clearly, and I'm sure everyone else can.
And you can see my screen as well.
I can see it, but
okay,
we need to move forward. I think it's not moving forward.
Okay. All right. The origins of vision. Vision is the act of sensing with eyes. It's sight. It's the power of anticipating what will come or may come. And having that vivid imagination or conception of, what is to come, we therefore can anticipate that it's real. And normally it should be something that should excite us, something of extraordinary beauty. And when you look at our national vision, the key question to ask is, does it encapsulate the set of central elements common to successful development experiences that would include all of us? That is social, economic, technical, institutional, and political actors. Clearly, the vision as spelled out came at the inception of the new dispensation. 2018 is when it was signed after our famous November 27, uprising. And the intent was to break away from the overarching, 5 national phase or 3 to 5 national plans phase in terms of, the period that we had prior to 2018. And this was now going to go beyond your usual 5-year period. This was looking at 12 years, specifically taking us from 2018 to 2030. And it sought to also break away from the rapid national decline that we had seen and move to a commonly shared vision to take forward the destiny of our nation. I think Tendai has already attributed the fact that it was not as inclusive, it was not as consultative as would ordinarily be the case. And there was that desire to create a thriving and open economy, creating opportunities for investors and also for employment. So I think 3 to 4 years down the road, we can really critique this in terms of progress made or lack thereof in terms of these various things. I would tick the boxes in terms of the plans actually coming through. Timelessly, we saw the transitional development plan coming through, and then of course the NDS1, which has come through. So this is a second planning phase that we're in, and there would be one more taking us. The current one takes us from 2021 to 2025, and then of course we would have a last one that would take us through to 2030. And clearly, in terms of objectives, you can see where it really draws from. It pulls out a lot in terms of the Agenda 2063, which is the African Union 50-year vision. And that alignment kind of is important, so that we are embedded in there and we can take an active part as far as that Vision 2063 is concerned. And then also, as Tendai also pointed out, we've got the SDGs that we're supposed to be part of, and clearly quite ambitious. I pick about 8 that I would think would be critical for us, as opposed to the 16 odd that are there in terms of what is achievable for us, in our time, Objectives, 8 in total. I think Tendai has gone through these. I'm going to speed past these. Rule of law, reorient towards democratization. Clearly, those, have challenges within themselves. My own focus is to look at the economic challenges, the investment decisions, the improvement of livelihoods or ordinary citizens,
Hi, Nigel. We've lost you there for a moment. Okay. So I think we might have a network issue that's going on. So to just get us continued, I'm going to just go through some of the comments that have been coming up. whilst I have some team members just checking in with Nigel, just to make sure that his connection is sorted. But as we do that, so we'll just give him another minute whilst we just make sure he can get back online. But as we do that, I'm going to just read out some of the comments that have come through. Tafadzo Muropa is saying most Zimbabweans are not aware of the current status of the country, and what is key to bring is to bring to task the administration and inquire on why they haven't achieved those milestones. Lack of political will in transforming these blueprints into reality is a great concern. Do we even have servant leadership in our public administration that listens to the citizens and serves their needs? So that's quite a few comments there coming from Tafadzo. Thank you so much for that. Please feel free as well to post your questions and comments into the chat. If you're also watching this on Facebook, you can also put your questions or your comments into those forums. So the chat on Facebook, or on Heart and Soul TV, on Newsday Zimbabwe, or on Severe Institute, and we'll just compile those for you. So Nigel, I think you're back. I'll just give you a few seconds to settle down and get your slides back up. In the meantime, I think in a space of about a minute, we've got a poll that we want to run. Just as Nigel is getting himself set up again, I'll ask my team members to put that up. And if you're watching this in our Zoom event room, please feel free to take this. It will take you less than a minute to just answer this poll. If you are a co-host on this platform, please don't press any buttons and just allow the poll to run for everyone else. It will take you just a few seconds. So what we want to find out is obviously your age and whether you've participated in an envisioning process before. And, are you aware of Vision 2030? Have you read the document? Is it something that you are aware of, or are you hearing this about this document and about this vision for the first time? And do you see yourself as somebody who can have a role, some kind of role or responsibility in ensuring that the country achieves the targets that it has set out to achieve in Vision 2030? So I'll just give that maybe 30 more seconds to run through as Nigel is setting up again. And, it just seems, although the poll isn't complete yet, but it just seems a lot of us are in our 30s and some, 40 and above. It probably means there's a lot of young people maybe that are not a part of this process. And a lot of us in this room are saying they have not participated in an envisioning process before. So that would be interesting to find out how private citizens can get involved in Vision 2030 or take part in the basic day-to-day processes that need to take place. So far, most of us have not accessed the Vision 20 strategy document for Zimbabwe. So far, that's about 60% of us. Okay, so that's quite a number. And but up to 93% of us right now are saying that they would like to, they do see themselves as having a role or responsibility in ensuring that the country achieves the targets that have been set out for Vision 2030. And I think that speaks into the inclusive growth that Dr. Mlisa was talking about, where growth needs to be inclusive for all. So it's good to see that Zimbabweans want to get involved. And that's an opportunity right there for anyone who's involved in public administration, policymaking, or is in some form of leadership role. So Sharon, I think you can end the poll when it hits 3 minutes. And then Nigel, feel free to continue with your presentation now. I think you're more settled, right?
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I lost network. It just shows we need infrastructure development like pronto, because I normally have a reliable network, but there you go. So I think looking at our plan, we've got to then look very critically at the attributes of what we would desire to be a progressive economic policy framework. And I've identified 6 things that I think are critical, because this is not the first plan we've had. I mean, we kind of sick and tired of plans, if you're going to be brutally honest. You know, plans must have a truthful historical context. This is imperative. It must acknowledge where we are, our exact location. I mean, if you've ever been lost, you know, and you get onto the cell phone and you try and call somebody who's been to the destination that you are trying to locate, any good guide will first and foremost ask you, where are you? And if you are full in terms of your location, you are unlikely to actually then get to the destination. You are unlikely to be successful in your quest to actually find your way to the destination. And so I think in terms of our plan, what we've at the moment is not acknowledge our historical context in terms of the political infighting, the wars that we've had, you know, the expropriation of land. So I think on that account, I've got a problem. And then the third aspect that I would say is we need to read our true north. Our true north is that, you know, where we all agree, you know, north is. That's the true north, the magnetic point where all forces identify and all compasses say that is north. Because otherwise, again, you know, we are guilty then of having a leadership that has dreamt of what they deem is true north, or technocrats that have dreamt of where true north is, and we just don't get there because they haven't located where we are, and therefore our destination and our desired destination is actually different. The fourth element is, of course, competent leadership. And if you've got a competent leadership team, then clearly you've got a better chance in terms of making sure that you take people with you. So a good leader, in my eyes, you know, addresses his audience, finds out where they are, and determines a destination jointly with them, as Tendai, you know, implied. And then we start marching to that destination with markers, by the way. We lay out markers where we should be at the end of each year so that it is very, very clear. If not, then we take our end game, you know, in terms of destination, and we break it down, you know, simple division, divide by 12 in terms of what their objectives were. And year by year, we should then make progress. And then we talk about a tipping point where we rally all and we seize the day and we seize the moment and make good, and then we execute. While necessarily, of course, monitoring and evaluating progress. And in this instance, our government makes it very clear. I take it into 5 pillars, which they clearly outline: governance, macroeconomic stability, mind my spelling there on financial re-engagement, because we're out of the global arena in terms of global finance. I think just a reintroduction recently with our capacity to enter into the SDR game, but even that is due really to the global pandemic more than it is, you know, to do with our own making. And at this juncture, if you recall in 2018, when our finance minister came, there was a World Bank meeting in Bali, and we thought that we're in, because with the greatest respect, I think Mthuli is very competent in terms of his understanding of how multilateral organizations work. And so he, having been at the African on himself, having worked with Afrexim, you would say we've got a technically competent structure, but guess what? On the political and social side, that's where I think our governance is really, really lacking. And then, of course, infrastructure and duties, which is the 4th pillar. You know, on that side, we've now began, you know, working, albeit very, very slowly and not in time to be able to meet the targets that we set for ourselves. We've got $34 billion worth of expenditure that is supposed to be raised, not from domestic resources, but actually from, you know, private sector, multilateral, and foreign investors. So again, you know, by account, we kind of are struggling there. Then the social development is anchored by, you know, the themes that they put out as SMEs, gender, and youth, you know, embedded with sports, recreation, and culture. So that's the approach that they've chosen. You know, I won't go back, you know, on the implications that we have now. There's only recognition of the debt, which we haven't been servicing, but we're going to pile on more debt to actually compensate white farmers. There is must determine where we are, and then that we are actually and can make. The competency of in saying that on the treasury, agriculture, mining, industry, commerce, central banking, and the investment agency that we have, which is ZIDA, I think we've got competency in terms of the economic ministries. But on the political front, on the governance front, I think the scorecard, you know, that Tendai has, if you look in depth, you know, we are clearly lacking on that front. And so if we talk of a competent team, if you needed to actually re that team, all social services, your education, your health, you know, need actually addressing in terms of where we stand. And then, of course, we move on to the social fabric. And there we turn to the World Bank report. As the Zimbabwe Economic Society, we've been privileged in having, you know, looked very carefully at the social fabric indicators. And these, unfortunately, make a sad reading. And then, you know, I want to then focus on what, again, would be a good attribute, would be to rally your people, rally the masses, so that we get to that magic moment when ideas, trends, social behaviors cross that threshold and they begin to spread like wildfire. And yet we've had moments, 1980, 2009, your constitutional reforms in 2012 into 2013, and of course, November 17. These, I think, are moments that we should have seized the day. And when they make themselves available, I think we've got to utilize them to rally the masses and get to a point where we can execute on the program. Execution requires the engagement of all of us. You know, the best thought out plans in the world aren't worth the paper they're written on if you can't pull them off. And you cannot pull them off if people are not participating. And so, to the credit of the Second Republic, they've displayed greater fiscal and monetary discipline. But let me dare say that it's been at great expense in terms of education, health, social fabric amidst COVID-19 pandemic. So while your fiscal austerity has exhibited your neoclassical economics, you know, it is, however, without a human face, and there is no effective trickle down to the bottom of the pyramid. And this is disheartening, to say the least. We need to transform our cultures, our values as a nation and as a people. We need to identify the opportunities that are coming forward with the African Continental Free Trade Area and the exporting opportunities so that we can hitch our wagon to be able to grow through exports, because we cannot grow through domestic expenditure. As we've seen, we've had unbridled, you know, government expenditure before, and this hasn't helped. We need to also harness this opportunity on devolution and allow infrastructure and utilities development within, you know, our different provinces. We need and then Fumvudza cannot just be directed to maize. It should be redirected as well to a diversity of crops. And with our organic farming background, we're capable, I think, of making a dent in global markets in terms of our exports. We've got the land, we've got the climate, we have the people, and we've shown through the growth of tobacco, the growing of tobacco and the growing of Pfumvudza-based maize, that we are quite capable of competing and punching above our weight. We need, of course, to exploit the opportunity around the exports, the exporting capacity that we have with our 55 minerals. And these obviously will entail new projects and then, of course, mineral beneficiation. I'm very excited about the potential in terms of the 34 billion that would be required for us to meet those goals by 2030 in terms of rehabilitating our infrastructure, which within itself is currently inadequate. And there it's a whole diverse, range. Roads, for example, the road infrastructure could benefit. We estimate that anything between 70% of your requirements for rehabilitating your 92,000 kilometers of existing road infrastructure, 70% of that could actually be sourced, from local sources. It's sand, it's cement, it's things of that nature that we are capable of then growing our economy, more assertively. The World Bank indicators, these have fallen off the radar just quite recently. I merit continuing to focus on this, making sure the process which I got involved in a couple of years ago when I chaired the Zimbabwe Investment Authority, things were low in terms of, I think we were ranked about 170 at the time. And all these have to do with dictatable environment.
Hi, Nigel. I think your network is falling off again. I would just like to ask you to round up as well, because our time is running out. So I'm not sure if you are still connected. Maybe if you could just round up as well. Okay, yeah, now you're back.
Okay. I think the key opportunities stem around poverty alleviation. And if we show 23% in May 2019. And clearly, those estimates would indicate that rank.
Hi, Nigel. I think we're probably going to have to end our presentation here. The network seems to be quite bad now. But what I would ask is if you could share your presentation as well, just so that people can get an idea of what you were sharing towards the end. I think key takeaways from me was the statement that you made about fiscal austerity without a human face is very, very dangerous. And it's good that we've been able to maintain our balance without going over and spending too much. But there is a human face, and that human face is what determines how inclusive growth is. So Nigel, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but I think the network just isn't friendly with us today. I'm going to move on to our next speaker, who is Sekai Kuvarika. She is the current CEO of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries. And Sekai, just as you're getting set up, I will give a quick introduction, just so that people are aware of who you are. But please feel free to share your video and unmute yourself in the process as I give this introduction. For those of you who may not be aware, like I said, she is the current CEO of the CZI. She has many years in development, focusing on economic development programs, and she's offered direct technical support for capacity building to the private sector, as well as to governments, to ensure participation in economic policy reform, business advocacy, public-private dialogue, and to assist in building enterprises in the area of development. She has a keen understanding of political economy, the actors in political economy settings, especially for Zimbabwe, the mechanisms, platforms, and also in fostering public-private dialogue. And she does have experience that transcends into the Southern African region. So Sekai, welcome, and please go for it. We are looking forward to this presentation. And as I said earlier, if you've got any questions or comments, please post them into the chat.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to Dr. Marisa for organizing this and for the invitation to present. I've titled my presentation, What It Will Take to Achieve Vision 2030. I am going to share some views, basically based on an industry perspective or from a business perspective. What I've done is I have taken the approach of looking basically at where we want to go, as well as what are the key imperatives to get us there. Acknowledging that there is a vision that has been stated by the current government, which is Vision 2030, an upper middle income economy by the year 2030. How then do we get to Vision 2030? And I think one of the key illustrations that we have come up with is relating to the issue of alignment, where we are trying to arrive to Vision 2030. It does highlight some of the legs or the wheels, if you may, that are supposed to drive us there. Of course, the current National Development Strategy is really the key to getting to Vision 2030 as far as the government planning framework and development framework is, as far as our current development framework goes. So clearly, as we are all familiar with how even just a motor vehicle, if you don't have wheel alignment on your motor vehicle, what would happen? You may probably be able to progress to a certain distance, but you will have unequal wear and unequal tear on your wheels. And when you try maybe to really accelerate and probably try to advance towards where you're wanting to go, you can actually derail the vehicle that is going there. So what we have noted is that we have the Vision 2030, we have National Development Strategy 1, and an anticipated National Development Strategy 2, as well as the various sector policies that drive this economy. It is important, therefore, that we go through a process of policy harmonization and alignment towards that vision. And that would also include the alignment of the institutions that deliver on that policy in and also alignment of institutions on the government and also on the private side as well. At the moment, this process we are saying, okay, now we are done. We've got a national development strategy. Can we now sit down with all the policies, look at whether they are all pointing towards the delivery of the first leg, which is the National Development Strategy 1. So that harmonization and alignment of policies and institutions leg towards the achievement of the National Development Strategy, as well as the subsequent achievement of the goals stated in the Vision 2030. my next slide is just, this is what could happen if we don't actually go through that harmonization process. And we may then not end up at Vision 2030, but we may end up somewhere along the way, but not exactly where we want to get to as a nation. I just want to highlight that, so this is just the menu of the policies that are currently there. And when we are speaking about harmonization and alignment, we are also, even from this most simplistic perspective of the tenure of the policies themselves, as you can see that, some of the policies, their dates, NDS is 2021 to 2025. The National Industrial Development Policy, for example, is 2019 to 2023. These policies that remain in place after we have come up with a whole new blueprint, does it really mean that they are 100% aligned to that vision in terms of the period of implementation, as well as their scope and scale, and as well as the strategies that they implement? So this remains a key issue for us. And just to highlight that, as we look at Vision 2030 from a business perspective, we believe that the fundamental source of long-term prosperity, which is stated in the vision, is the productivity with which we can utilize our human capital and natural resources to produce goods and services in this economy. In our view, to get to Vision 2030 really requires that we go through an industrial transformation, which would deliver the economic transformation that can yield the outcomes that would deliver the social and development outcomes that are envisaged in the Vision 2030. So we do believe that it is very important that particular attention is given to industrial transformation, especially if we look at the history of our industrialization, where we are in terms of industrialization, and also the experience we have gone through over the past decade or more, where we have experienced very significant levels and worrying levels of deindustrialization, and also just a decline in the performance of our industry. I just wanted to start with some baseline information that speaks to the current state of affairs in the immediate short term, as well as maybe the historical perspective of where we are. As CZI, we have been analyzing and reviewing the performance of industry now on a quarterly basis. We have been doing a manufacturing sector survey every year. We started to do it on a quarterly basis in 2021, so that we are able to have more frequent iterations between industry performance and the policies, and are able to give more regular feedback to policymakers on the impact of policies, as well as on the trends that are obtaining in industry. So you'll find that in 2020, our capacity utilization was at 47%. But the projection for 2021, and I would like to underline where this projection comes from. This projection comes from industry's own plans. We gather it from what industrialists believe would be their capacity utilization the following year, based on the obtaining factors and the anticipated business environment in the country or any other market conditions they may see, as well as also based on the investment plans they may have or growth and expansion plans they have. So their prediction for 2021 was 61%. And in the first quarter of 2021, this capacity utilization was 47%, still the same as 2020. But the second quarter was now 54%. And the projection for third quarter that we got in second quarter was 56%. If you also look at the performance of listed companies, you will see that there is some positive outlook on the economy quarter by quarter, and I think driven by the growth that they are experiencing. So I've just highlighted that. We've got more detail here, but I will not go into that. We'll share the presentation as well. And also maybe to note the increase even in trading volumes. And maybe I should highlight the employment impact that we have seen, that, you know, in our surveys, at least about 50% of the companies are reporting a creation of new jobs in their companies. And what we've done is we've looked at this as a percentage of current establishments, which then shows you that the growth in capacity utilization or in volumes and outputs that we are seeing is also coming with some job creation. Whether these numbers are large enough for where we are and where we want to go is a matter for discussion, but there are signs that that growth and that development is actually happening. I think I would then want to probably make a reference to the falling inflation, but also highlight that the month-on-month inflation has generally been on an upward trend now for the past maybe 2 or 3 months. And also to highlight and emphasize the challenges that I think maybe previous speakers have already mentioned about the widening premium between the parallel market and the official exchange rate, and also what we have seen, the auction market not particularly operating as a Dutch auction system, which it was set to do, and if it had done that, was set to act as a price discovery mechanism as we transition to an efficient foreign exchange market. So this is, of course, reflected in what you could call currently, maybe we do have sort of a distorted supply and demand situation where all bids are allocated, but not necessarily set market now, and they pre-believe that this is a matter that requires it, that we had experienced. We had referred to it as CZI as a fragile stability, mainly on the basis that it needed authorities and the market to be very careful about what to do and what not to do in order not to actually unsettle that stability. And I think what is happening right now is testing, and it requires that corrective action is actually taken immediately, so that whatever dislocation is eventual may not be as big as it would be if there is some policy procrastination from the part of the authorities in terms of addressing this. And our ask on this position is basically, number one, that the auction should auction what is available so that there is a true price discovery. And number two, that the outstanding bids be settled so that we don't create a legacy situation. I was just highlighting here some of the, the indicators. I think Nigel did speak to our ease of doing business and the performance of industry, which shows you as we were getting worse and worse in ease of doing business, of course, performance of industry was also declining. And one of the key indicators we have been tracking, and which has really affected the performance of business, has been the energy availability, electricity in particular. And of course, you find that in 2019 and 2020, early 2020, this was a huge problem. And because of the increase in energy supply, improvement in energy supply, we have begun to see an improvement as well in capacity. I'm back now to, okay, what's the rationale for industrial transformation in order to deliver a middle income economy for Zimbabwe? We are currently a low income country, and it is important that we move from where we are at the moment. And I think our position is that we need to transform the country's industry from producing simple and low-value peripheral goods to producing and exporting more complex, higher value core products. And these will pay better incomes whilst creating more jobs and earning more foreign currency for the country. So this is a position that, you know, in order to get to that level of economic development, we do need to transform our industry and come up with an industry that will deliver high quality jobs and that can deliver the livelihoods that are anticipated. And this requires definitely some policy interventions. This is Zimbabwe's value of trade and that of Africa are very low relative to developed economies, so they do not deliver high incomes for the population. So this is again the case for the need for industrial transformation in order to deliver a middle income, an upper middle income society. I will skip this, this table. But also just to highlight, you know, the issue of complex goods and higher value goods that I was talking about. You can also see that generally the economies that are more complex do have a higher GDP. To GDP has been declining. And this is just illustrating the decline. I would like to also maybe bring in the fact that, you know, if you look at the imports that we have at the moment, some of them are raw materials which could actually be processed and produced here. But because we are not progressing, particularly in the products that require mainly scientific, still importing those products. Even for some semi-processed products, which we have the basic raw materials here, because we have not developed our industries that then produce some of these goods, we then have to import that raw material from outside the country. I will skip this slide. And just to highlight that for us to increase our economic complexity, we must deliberately target through our industrial policy, the production of trade of more complex products. And I think the NDS1 has mentioned that we are moving the economy up the value chain, and it is our anticipation that policies will begin to point in that direction. So the targets that we have set for ourselves are actually very, very high. And in order to meet these targets, we need to take very bold moves and not gradual steps, as you can see. Also to then highlight what we had looked at as industry vis-a-vis the pathway to Vision 2030. On the industrial transformation timeline, we had looked at industrial development over the same, you know, roughly the same period as the timeline for the Vision 2030. Coincidentally, our process also had started in 2018, coinciding with the development of the industrial policy. And our main goal in phase one, which is 2018 to 2019, had been balanced orientation towards competitiveness, but mainly focusing on macroeconomic stability, and also a competitive and stable local currency. And as you can see that, you know, during that similar period, that was the TSP, period. And the expectation was that the policies would then deliver macroeconomic stability and create a conducive environment for business to begin to grow. Okay, sorry. And then in terms of the NDS1 period, we are looking at industrial upgrading and transformation. and the goal being domestic and regional market capture, export diversification, as I've spoken about, economic complexity and more value goods that have more value on exports, and integration in the regional and global value chains. And of course, during that the NDS period, this is the period where we are now in terms of the first 5 years and the second 5 years of the development process towards the Vision 2030. This achievement will basically depend on whether we are able, through the menu of policies that we have, to actually deliver a competitive business environment. And in turn, business will deliver growth and stability and be able to move the economy up the value chain. There is a need to develop policy programs to address sector competitiveness and ease of doing business. And the aim basically is that we become the most efficient and most competitive place of production in the region and on the continent. And if this can attract new entrants into the sector, attract innovative and technologically advanced firms, and promote SME development, it would definitely contribute to the achievement of the economic returns that would deliver the social outcomes and development outcomes that are being sought in Vision 2030. I think it is important to note that the ultimate goal of competitiveness is the prosperity of a nation's people by per capita living standards. It is not just for industry or for a certain segment of the economy. And this makes competitiveness a non-negotiable in the vision of, in the pursuit of Vision 2030. I think one of the things that maybe we need to talk about is that the interactions and collaboration and cooperation between labor, business, civil society has not been optimal to the extent that we are all able to realize that which will serve our common interests at the end of the day. And ultimately, this is about creating conditions under which citizens and companies can be the most productive, and so that we have wages, so that wages and investment returns can sustain economic growth that supports the desired standard of living that is stated in the Vision 2030. I'll probably not go into detail in the industrialization targets in terms of the specific set targets for 2030. And I wanted to just maybe highlight an additional point that when we talk about consultation, one of the observations I've made is that as intermediary or representative organizations, I think we do have a responsibility to aggregate input from our various constituencies so that when we have consultations with government, we have actually prepared and consulted those different constituencies for that input. Sometimes, you know, I know that there's a stately pace of probably policy implementation, but sometimes there's a very rushed pace in terms of consultations. There's usually not enough time once the consultations themselves start. And I think it's important that in the non-state actors, we are able to already consolidate, to already mobilize and consolidate our various positions that would be applicable to the various developments in policy or in government's own development planning going forward. And the second point for me is the issue of private dialogue. I think we have made quite a lot of discussion around public-private dialogue or dialogue between the government and non-state actors, but we haven't made much progress in terms of having conversations on our own, business to business across sectors or across value chains, as well as the business and civil society or business and labor. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Sekai, for that presentation. Very insightful. And I think anyone who reads it and looks at it afterwards will be able to just note the key conversations that you've brought up. So Yeah, I think for me, the one takeaway was just that the targets that we've set as a country are quite high, and we need to make bold moves before we can actually attain Vision 2030. And I guess the whole point of this would then be to then find out what could those bold moves be. And so right now we're going to go into our next presenter. We won't take talking points now. We'll just go straight into our next presenter, who's Stephen Brian. He's from Legatum Institute, but as he's getting settled and as the Severe team is getting his presentation ready, I would just like to pose a question to Sekai. What could those bold moves be? We'll talk about that when we come back to do a quick question and answer. And then to Nigel, your question is going to be, what would you say is the one policy recommendation that could be a game changer for Vision 2030? And then to Tendai, if one change was also to be made in attaining Vision 2030, what would that one change be? So with all of you, I think it's just saying if there was one bold move to be taken, what would that bold move be based on the presentations that you were doing? But right now, I'd like to invite us to take a listen to Stephen. Stephen did a presentation, which was very good in our first webinar, which was the need for a vision process. In that one, he gave a very great overview of how other countries have gone through envisioning processes. So countries like Rwanda, countries like Saudi Arabia, that we look up to today. But right now, what he's going to do is to give us an overview of a report on Zimbabwe that was done by Legatum Institute. So it's a Pathways to Prosperity report, which they do on many countries, including Zimbabwe. Stephen is the director of a policy at Legatum Institute, and he does a lot of work on doing research in terms of socioeconomic policy, as well as advising governments in different parts of the world on how they can improve their socioeconomic policies. So I won't take up too much of your time, Stephen, if you can go for it. And then afterwards, we'll have just a quick round from our panelists.
Great, thank you, Belinda, and it's great to be back again. If we just stick on the first slide for a second. So I think what I'd like to do is hopefully trying to take a little bit of a stock of what we've heard today and synthesize it in terms of getting a holistic assessment of Zimbabwe's starting point, to pick up on Nigel's point about we need to know where we are if we want to have the guide to help us to move to the vision. And what I'd like to do is sort of complement some of the detail from Tendai and Sekai in terms of where we are, but looking at it from an international perspective. And I think with respect to the bold moves, there's another layer to this that we might want to touch on at some point, which is from the point of view of international best practice, how fast can these moves be made? At what rate can GDP per capita increase plausibly? At what rate can transport and infrastructure systems be developed? At what rate can, to pick up Sekai's point about economic diversification complexity, at what rate can that happen? Because I think it's going to be important to look at the targets that have been set and say, these ones are very achievable in the context of international benchmarks, these ones less so, so that, again, there's a level of realism that'll come into this exercise. But that's all part of the dialogue and the debate. Now, to pick up on what Belinda said, what we did last year was engage in a pretty thorough and holistic perspective and diagnostic of what we call Zimbabwe's prosperity. And we looked at it through a lens around 3 domains. One we call inclusive societies, which picks up on both the formal and the informal institutions in the country, levels of violence, levels of freedom, the nature of governance, the strength of social capital. And our experience is that until they are well settled and secure, the ability of an economy to thrive is always going to be thwarted. So at one level, when we think about economic development, our first question is, are the institutions of the state, the nation, well grounded? Do they facilitate an economy to work or not? Then within the economic domain, we look at the quality of the investment environment, whether enterprise conditions are good. Is it easy to start a business? Do you have good infrastructure and market access? And then is the economic quality, is the resulting nature of the economy vis-a-vis inflation, macroeconomic growth, employment, etc., is that working out? And then, in effect, all that is designed from a social point of view to make sure that people have good living conditions, good health, good education, and that the natural environment is stewarded for current and future generations. So we see that as a sort of golden thread running through that. Without an inclusive society, it's very difficult to have a good economy working. And it's also really important to pick up on the inclusiveness that Tendai focused on, to make sure that the wealth and the resources that are generated out of the economy are actually deployed for the well-being of people as a whole, rather than those at the top of the pyramid. So what I'll do is I'll sort of quickly go through each of these 12 pillars that we've laid out here to give it just a snapshot sense of where does Zimbabwe fit in the sort of African rankings. And that can give us a little bit of a traffic light sense of, this is doing okay, these are the areas that we really need to focus on, so that you can place the challenges that all three earlier speakers laid out in a continental perspective. And of course, you could take a layer up again to think about it global perspective. But I think to start with, just looking at where Zimbabwe fits in the African rankings is a good trigger for further thought. So if we move on to safety and security as the first one on the next slide. I've given that a sort of green traffic lighting. This is not a sort of a major area of concern or focus, but it's worth touching on, I think, two aspects of that are probably downstream of some things we'll talk about in a minute, which is, when you look at politically related terror and violence, Zimbabwe is sort of midway in the rankings in Africa, but I think we'd have to sort of put an honesty hat on and say Africa in a global context, ranks relatively weakly on this. So there's an issue here that, I reckon most of the audience will have a greater sensitivity to than I do in terms of, life experiences when there are sort of political debates, protests, etc. How does that play out? And then the other piece, which I think is a function of polarization, a lack of trust, etc., is the high level of violent crime. So there's something here about an unsettled society that gets manifest in high levels of crime. So from a broad sense, these are the two areas to focus on, but they're not probably the most important issues. They're downstream of where I think we get into more interesting areas, which will start on the next slide in terms of freedoms. So when we look at personal freedom, 36th in Africa, so the ranking has come down a bit. And this is really where we start to see where the social contract, the trust between, as it were, government and society, the extent to which, in order to maintain a sense of order, the government has historically felt it has need to curtail freedom. And this trade-off between freedom and order has many different or stable points. And what we're trying to do is get to a point where actually it is much more, it's a stable point, but there's a much greater degree of freedom. Because when people are free to move around, when people don't feel they're going to be stopped at roadblocks, when there are no arbitrary arrests, when people can assemble and make their voice heard, when they can have genuine freedom of speech, both before, during, and after speech, that creates air, that creates space in society for the dialogues we're talking about, that sense of I can really say what I think and I'll be listened to and my voice will be respected. So our experience is that some of these are really critical issues to create the atmosphere that allows a lot of the other aspects of prosperity to flourish. And that's about resetting a relationship, starting to reset the social contract. The other part of that, which I then think is the most critical part, is governance. And that then goes from amber to red, where at its heart, I think this is really the crux of the issue in terms of Zimbabwe, and trying to find a resetting. How do we address polarization that Tendai mentioned? We have a world where executive constraints on the government are weak relative to a lot of other countries. Political accountability is relatively weak. We touched on the rule of law. Tendai mentioned more judges. We also need to make sure that where there's a strong quality judiciary, they have that ability to be truly independent of the government and acting as that mediator between parties. So this is a part about political capacity. Is the political setup one that is balanced, avoids and sort of reduces polarization, or is it one that exacerbates polarization? And that's an area that we definitely think more dialogue, more conciliation could make a big difference on. Downstream of that then is because of the legacy of polarized politics, government has not been driving its main focus towards the well-being of the citizens. It has been, as in a number of other countries, focusing to a great extent on sort of maintaining its control. As a result, we see relatively high levels of corruption and poor government effectiveness. Civil servants are poorly paid. We've got a lack of true meritocracy within the system. So this is why I'm pausing on this for a second, because I think that until we grasp hold of this nettle and address it, it'll be very difficult to create the circumstances whereby the economy can flourish, because the economy is dependent on political stability. It's dependent on the government playing its role competently, managing services, making sure that public procurement works, making sure that corruption is minimized so that the value that's generated in the economy is recycled to enhance the benefit of everybody rather than being siphoned off, making sure that this truly is an open economy whereby there aren't side deals cut with favorite players to enhance line the pockets of certain people, but also resulting in not always getting the best contracts. So this sense of government integrity and effectiveness is going to be critical to enable the economy to flow. The last element of inclusive society is social capital. And what we see here is that there's a dichotomy. What many people literally call bonding social capital, i.e., how strong are personal family relationships? How strong are social networks? It's very strong in Zimbabwe. That is a real strength. But as you shift from, does my family and my community support me? Do I know them? Do I trust them? To, how do I engage with strangers? Do I trust the institutions? Are the institutions trustworthy? This is where there's a big gap. And again, this is probably a consequence of some of the polarization, consequence of weakly administered government agencies, police, the parliaments, the courts, etc. What we see is a warning flag about polarization society, that one of the things that we'll need to see over the next 5-10 years as society comes together, as this vision is realized, is that people begin to trust strangers more, people begin to trust the institutions more, and those institutions are deserving of that trust, because it's only when we establish stronger bonds of trust, again, can an economy flourish. Economies flourish on a larger scale when you are feeling comfortable and trusting of strangers. You can engage in commerce with strangers rather than having to keep it close to your family and to well-known people. That's how society, which is to an extent atomized, and the economy, which is to an extent atomized today, can really grow. Those connections with people you don't know that well, but it's worth making them because you trust them. That's an essential part of progress, I would say. So now let's flip to the economy itself. First up, infrastructure and market access. We've seen the impact of unreliable network connections today, but I would say actually water and electricity are critical issues to work on. Transport, these areas have weakened over time, predominantly because of the lack of maintenance. So there's real effort needed to actually get the basics maintained as much as it is to engage in sort of shiny new projects. Again, trying to focus on the nuts and bolts from a government point of view of maintaining and steadily enhancing systems. That's hard work. It's not sort of flashy, but it's really essential. And that's where a good government that's effective will appropriately put enough energy into some of the low profile stuff that affects everybody. And then on the trade side, we've touched on the sanctions issue, but what I'd flag is to what extent, and this is my challenge to sort of the group, to what extent is it easy for people to bring goods in and out of the country? To what extent is Zimbabwe and the border system, the customs, making that work smoothly? And when I look at the rankings for this in Africa, Zimbabwe is one of the weaker ones. So again, let's work on sorting that out too, so that goods can freely flow. When I then look at the next area, which is the investment environment, again, flashing red light here. Property rights, Tendai mentioned, I think it was Tendai who mentioned, the ongoing issues vis-a-vis land reform, and historically Zimbabwe's had real challenges there, so that definitely still needs to be an area of focus. Because if property rights aren't insecure, it's always going to be a challenge to get investment flowing. And then on the financing ecosystem, we see the banks supporting big business, but we don't see small and medium-sized enterprises getting access to capital. That really is sort of the gap in the Zimbabwe market. And again, if we think about what Sekai was saying about economic complexity and diversity, we've got to make sure that the small, innovative companies are getting access to capital. They can grow and they can create new sectors, they can create new markets. And then, again, let me come back to sort of international investment. There has been historically many restrictions on who can come in and the need to have 51% domestic ownership of companies, and challenges that we've heard about getting access to foreign capital. So again, work has been done here. I think more work needs to be done on making sure that the environment is attractive for foreign investors. They feel they can come in, they can run their companies, they can take their profits back and repatriate them as well. Because if they can't do that, they won't come in the first place. Third up in the economic sphere is what we call enterprise conditions. Again, this is where I think probably the biggest flashing light, but also in some ways the easiest to deal with. What we're thinking about here is, how easy is it for a company to enter a market to compete against the incumbents? To what extent are prices distorted because of price controls and subsidies? How easy is it to register a new company, pay your taxes, manage regulation, hire people? What are the conditions for labor markets? Now, across the board, this is an area where governments can make choices. And actually, it's a little bit more than a stroke of a pen, but no money is required here. It's a mindset. It's a sense of Zimbabwe is open for business. Zimbabwe at the moment has a massive informal economy. Why is that? Because so many of these regulations are restrictive that it's just a lot easier to bypass the system. Why don't we think about how to ask a question, what will it take for the informal urban workers, the farmers, to engage in the formal economy? How do we reframe this question about, rather than saying I'm suspicious of companies I want to regulate, say, how do I help them join the formal economy, connect with others, get access to capital and so forth? So I think big issue to be addressed here. Finally, on the economic quality, when we look at the outcomes, Sekai has mentioned this already around the fiscal sustainability, macro stability. We saw in 2013 that stabilized, 29 to 13 stabilized, got worse again. We had a recent stabilization. So this is something where a track record needs to be established for investors to feel, okay, this is a soundly run economy where my investment won't suddenly depreciate. I'll quickly flick through the other areas. So that's the economy that needs to get sorted out. So see where the traffic lights are red. Living conditions, not bad. Clearly, the red flag here is nutrition, and that really is a consequence of too many people not having access to the resources to feed themselves, to be able to secure more than what they can get off the land. But it's not where I'd be focusing. Upstream, I think, is where we'd defocus to start with. Health, again, not a massive area of necessary focus. Obviously, through COVID, there's been issues. But when I look across the continent, Zimbabwe is not doing too badly. In education, the one I call out would be secondary education. I think we've already heard that already today because of the fact that we're not getting enough people working their way through that system. And finally, you can do the last one. Finally, on the environment, water, sort of a critical environmental sustainability issue, and that's where I'd be focusing on in that area. So that's a quick canter through an international benchmarking perspective of where Zimbabwe is and where I would see from an outsider's view, the issues are most pressing.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And I love the way you were so succinct. Thank you so much, really appreciate it. So I think we'll just take 5 minutes because we've already gone over our time. We'll just take 5 minutes to kind of get rounding comments from all of our panelists. Stephen, I'll start with you. So you've done this report, Pathways to Prosperity, on Zimbabwe as well as many other countries. Now, my question to you is, do you think that Vision 2030, is it still possible for Zimbabwe to attain Vision 2030? Or is there just not enough time yet? I don't know whether, as Sekai was saying, maybe we need to make one bold move. Is that possible? Do we have enough time? Do we need to be considering a longer framework of time? What are your thoughts around that?
I think when I look at it, it's half doable, half not. Absolutely, Sekai is right. We need to identify bold moves. And I think on the stuff we've been talking about, the ease of doing business, that area, that can get sorted out, I think, pretty quickly. I think when you look at, and I touched on this, the required growth rate to achieve the income target, it's just not feasible. No country has, China did it for a while, but no country has been doing 12, 13% per annum per capita growth rates. And I think I'd strongly urge a bit of realism, a bit of benchmarking about what's possible so that you take the subset of goals, Vision 2030, that you can achieve. Make sure you work hard on those and have a little bit of realism on some of the others so you're not disappointed. I think there's a bit of calibration needed.
Yeah. All right, brilliant.
But stay ambitious.
Yeah. Brilliant. Nigel, I'm hoping you're connected here. And this time, I think we'll do it with the video off. Your question would be, what would be the one thing, one policy change that you think should be made to get us to Vision 2030? Okay, so Rebecca, I think you've heard that. Maybe whilst Nigel settings are being changed, Dr. Marisa, to you, to get to inclusive growth, what one thing needs to change?
See, I'm not a fan of just growth. I keep on talking about qualifying what I mean by growth, because we've seen jobless growth. We have seen growth just driven by speculation, speculative industries. So for me, it's like the big questions around infrastructure, but that create jobs. So we have this infrastructure drive that the ruling party and government keep on talking about, but we're not seeing it being converted into massive employment. Right now, we are bulging at the middle. The youth are the majority in the population, but our youths are highly underutilized, etc. So if we can find a way of making sure that some of these infrastructure projects, especially the roads, etc., are inclusive of the youth, and also to really, because at a political rhetoric level, there's talk of including the youth in agriculture, but we really need to see some bold moves around that. Either you're allocating farms to youths, or you're actually allocating a space for them to be engaged in value addition within certain value chains. So I think for me, the employment question looms large as we're talking about growth, because that's the only way we can begin to talk about the extent to which it's inclusive. Thanks, Belinda.
Okay, thank you so much. Nigel?
Okay, well, my apologies about my network, because it truncated my focus in terms of what I think is the game changer. Yeah. My presentation is available for people so that they can see, but my main focus is really poverty alleviation. At the moment, I was just going to indicate when I was probably cut off that we've got 49% of the population now deemed poor. They're living below the poverty datum line, and we're talking here of an ambition of $5,000 US, GDP per capita. We probably are in the region of 200. 200 to 340 is the indication from the surveys that have just been done out of the World Bank report. We also see there that poverty has increased between if you look at that Gini coefficient in terms of inequality, that's risen, you know, in a negative manner, whereby, you know, poverty has increased. And if that's the mass of our population, then we've got to address that. I mean, people like teachers, you know, what we had gained in yesteryear in terms of education. And if you look at Stephen's rankings, even, you know, based on comparative stats, we had a competitive edge there, but we're fraying at the edges. And clearly, if we don't address that, you know, we are on a very slippery slope, because the rate at which we will actually decline is quite phenomenal. So what am I saying? I think the one game changer is sorting out the politics of this country. The politics have really cost the economy a whole lot more than is necessary. And at the moment, if you look at the inclusive agenda, Pollard, for example, it's missing one key player, the largest opposition member. Now, if you don't have him at the table, he carries half the population anyway. So what are we talking about in terms of an inclusive approach for all stakeholders and a vision that actually includes all of us? You know, the jobless, the voiceless, the unemployed or jobless. I mean, at the end of the day, we cannot possibly get to that dreamland that we call, you know, that we include in Vision 2030. We cannot. It's virtually impossible. And so I would be calling for a, you know, a political dialogue which is all inclusive, in, you know, meaning the army is at the table as well. And we determine a future which we want. And I'm all in favor. You know, the former mayor from the opposition party, I credit him with the whole ideology around this. He says suspend elections for 10 years. It will do us a world of good for us to actually have a GNU of sorts run by technocrats while we sort out the constitution, while we sort out how to, you know, to hold free and fair elections. I think that would be the way to go. But coming back to more what I know, because I'm less conversant with the political landscape, but, you know, I have said this to people, the political risk premium of Zimbabwe is far too high, yet we are far too rich to be poor. We've got the resources, we've got the people, we've got the capacity, as we've shown invariably, to actually do a, you know, bottom-up approach. What we've demonstrated in terms of Pfumvudza can be done with a variety of crops, and I made mention of that. We need livable wages for teachers and health frontline staff so that people can negotiate. We need to harness those arbitrage skills, you know, where people are traders and they're trading, you know, in Forex. We need to harness those skills so that they can drive our export agenda. Those guys, in terms of instead of putting them into jail, get them to arbitrage our commodities globally. And let's see whether they can churn out the sort of profits that they have, because we have those capacities within us. So let's, you know, have a paradigm shift altogether. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nigel. Yeah, I would agree with you, definitely. Our political risk premium is way too high. And I'm sure a lot of people on the outside looking in just wonder why, you know, Zimbabwe is still where she is, and yet we are endowed with so much as a country. So I think definitely this goes to all the players involved in any political process. We need to find ourselves in the middle, and that I think it's a responsibility that everybody needs to place upon themselves, you know, to find the next person. So I think for today, this is probably where we're going to end our dialogue, which was an overview of Zimbabwe today. So I would like to thank.
How about Sekai?
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Tendai. Sekai, so sorry. Sekai, last words from you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the last words from me are basically that if we have ever been in a period where we need a clarion call, for a concerted effort towards a shared vision. Although we have issues with how this vision may have been developed, I think I would still at a personal level desire to be in that kind of economy. So I will not argue with that. So I think we are at a point where we need that clarion call to be made from all quarters of society and the economy. And just to highlight that when you are coming from a protracted decline, which is where we are coming from, you cannot afford gradualism. And when we are at a point where the rest of the world is advancing and going ahead, and really we cannot afford gradualism. And when we are at a point where we are now faced with the continental free trade area and it's becoming a reality, we cannot afford gradualism. And particularly, I'm speaking to issues of competitiveness. We really have to take bold moves. And by bold moves, what I mean is we have to benchmark ourselves with the best and aim to be that or better at whatever cost that it takes. And to this end, I would say that I remember Professor Mtuli rallying around the point of austerity for prosperity. And I think now it's time for government to delay gratification, that the authorities need to exercise delayed gratification as far as revenue from maybe excessive taxation is concerned, and also revenue that comes from excessive regulation of business is concerned, so that businesses are given the room to grow and grow the cake rather than continue to extract from probably a limited or shrinking cake. So at this point, I would say we need a call to action to really advance the economy and advance the society and advance the lives of our people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Definitely, we do need to grow that cake. Thank you so much. And that was a great way to end that. That is, we're putting it out there. You know, we need a clarion call. We need people mobilized together. I think I'll just refer back to Stephen's presentation last week. Kind of gave a highlight of how other countries have kind of made that clarion call. You know, it seems like it's a very engaging process. It's a long process. It means people literally meeting up in, you know, creating focus groups and working out specific areas of the economy and how they can be improved, what needs to be changed, how does that need to happen. And if we can do that, you know, find ourselves and get that process of engagement taking place, I'm sure we will stand somewhat of a chance. And, you know, as Stephen was saying, we might just get there. My hope is that we can get to more than half, even though Stephen was saying it's half and half. But I think we'll end it here for today. Thank you so much to Sekai, great presentation. Nigel, great presentation. Really sorry everyone about the network. I think it was an issue all around. Tenai Murisa, Dr. Tenai Murisa, Dr. Stephen Brian, thank you so much for your great presentations. You've been watching or you've been involved in this is the second dialogue that Civil Institute is hosting on an overview of Zimbabwe. And we were looking also at prospects for moving forward. We are going to be back in 2 weeks from now on the 20th of October. And we're going to be having our third dialogue in this series. This is a series that's running up until the 1st of December on Vision 2030. How, as Zimbabweans, we can kind of create consensus around Vision 2030 and how we can get us as a country moving towards that. Okay, and thank you very much to Heart and Soul TV, who have been our broadcast partners for today. You can catch this on Facebook if you want to watch it again. Feel free to share it as well with your networks. So the CV Institute Facebook page, Newsday Zimbabwe, and Heart and Soul TV. My name is Belinda Chaura, and I've been your facilitator for today. This is just to say thank you very much for all your questions, your chats, your comments. I'm sorry we couldn't get through to all of them, but the issues are noted, and the presentations will be available on the CV Institute website. Thank you so much, and have a good day. you.